So my name is Ziad Munson, and I am a sociologist, and my primary job is to do research on questions that we don't have answers to. And most of my career, I have focused on one question, and that is, what is it and how is it that some people in our society become activists for causes that they care about in order to change the world? And we've seen this throughout American history. The original rebels who founded this country, through the people who eliminated slavery, who brought women the right to vote, civil rights for people regardless of the color of their skin, environmental activism, and so on and so forth. So that's what I study, and I travel around the country talking to activists, talking to non-activists, and trying to understand what are the causes of activism in the hopes that I can share that insight and have more people contribute to changing the world. And that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about. And to do that, I thought I'd introduce to you one particular activist that I spoke to a number of years ago in Massachusetts. I'm going to call her Elizabeth. Everyone I talked to is anonymous, so it's not her real name. But at the time I spoke to her, she was a 21-year-old college student who was an activist in the pro-life movement that seeks to end legal abortions in the United States. And that was her idea of how to change the world for the better. As I said, I'm a sociologist. I don't judge what people's views are about how to change the world. I simply ask, how do they want to change the world, and how did they become activists? In any case, Elizabeth was interesting to me because she encapsulated so much of how so many people become activists in the world. And core to that was how she first got started. And the way she got started was she had just moved from California to Massachusetts to go to college. And at the beginning of her second semester, as she's still trying to find friends and so forth, a person in the dorm, a friend of hers, asked her if she wanted to go on a bus trip to Washington, D.C. And she said, sure, it'll be fun. And where she went was something called the annual March to Life march or protest that the National Pro-Life Movement holds every year. She didn't know that that's what she had agreed to go to, but she really enjoyed it. She met lots of friends, and she became an activist that has been really involved in the movement, to the point actually where in some cases she was defying the law in order to stand up for her activism. And I think that she illustrates sort of one of the reasons that we often don't understand how people become activists, because our culture and our media environment tells us that the people who are part of movements are the people who care most about those things. They care most about the environment, or they care most about women's rights, right? Or the abortion issue, whether they're pro-choice or pro-life. But the reality is, a good number of people who are activists in all kinds of different areas actually start with no particular interests in the issue at all, and certainly no opinions about it at all. That was true of Elizabeth that I just told you about. She said yes to going to an event because she was in a new place and she wanted to meet friends. She wanted to be with her friend. And it was through being with that friend and participating in this event that she didn't know anything about, that she learned more about this issue. And so one of the sort of key findings in the research that I have done is that we have this myth that activists are the people who are the bravest, who care the most, who have the most principles. But actually it turns out that the people who change the world, right, the people who answer the question, why not, are just ordinary people, like everyone in this room, trying to do ordinary things like make connections with people. And in fact, in the work that I've done over 2 decades now, 44% of the activists I've spoken to in the pro-life movement, when they first participated in the first thing that they did, they would have never called themselves pro-life at all. And now you might say, well, okay, that's something special about this one issue, abortion, or the pro-life movement, or conservative movements. But it's not true. Since I have published this work, lots and lots of other scholars have looked at this in liberal movements, in conservative movements, in historical movements, in contemporary movements, in movements in the United States, and in movements in Europe, in Asia, in South America, and elsewhere. right? The reality is that we don't become activists because we care about a cause. We learn to care about a cause because we become activists. Action precedes belief rather than the reverse. As I said about Elizabeth, she was looking for social connection. She wasn't looking to change the world, but in that attempt to get social connection, she really did participate in a movement to change the world. And it was a friend that did this, right? It wasn't the fact that she saw a meme on her social media. She didn't respond to a flyer in the hallway of her high school. It was an actual flesh and blood connection that she had. And that's another important piece of this, right? Is that activism doesn't just happen. It happens when we are connected to other people in face-to-face, flesh and blood sorts of ways. We call this, in sociology, we call this your social network. And we're not talking about the social networks online. We're talking about the actual connections that real people have. So, I mean, I mentioned Elizabeth, but I could talk about Nancy. And Nancy was someone who is similarly a student. But in her case, she was a high school student. And she was friends with another young woman who became pregnant and had an unwanted pregnancy, and accompanied her to a clinic in order to terminate that pregnancy. She didn't have any ideas about this issue before. Again, she showed up, she said yes, because she was going to help a friend. And that led to a lifetime of, in this case, pro-choice activism. That's how activism actually works. And the other thing that is also really interesting about activists are that we don't all become activists at any particular point in our lives. There are specific places in people's lives where they're much more likely to become activists than others. And I call these things turning points, right? High school and college are key turning points in people's lives, right? You're all going through a turning point now. And the reason is because a turning point is a time when the kinds of things you do day to day, the kind of people you meet, the connections you have are changing, and often changing pretty rapidly. And there's lots of parents in the room too. It's not just young people who get involved in activism, but the next time that people tend to become activists is much later in life, when their children leave the house, for example, and they become empty nesters. When people retire, for example, right, and suddenly are not going to a job every day. These are times when people's habits change and they are looking for social connection and they turn out for activism. So what I want to leave you with today is, when we ask the question, why not, it's important to remember that it's not, the people who become activists, the people who change the world, are not chosen, right? All of the heroes of our books and our movies and our TV series, right? These are chosen people. Cinderella is chosen. Harry Potter is chosen. The Last Airbender is chosen, right? Katniss in the Hunger Games is chosen. But that's not actually how activism works, right? You aren't chosen. You don't have to be courageous. You don't have to have conviction. What you need to have is connection. Right? Activists are made by the process of being involved in activism. And so my message to you in terms of why not is, say yes to your friends. Say yes to doing things with real live flesh and blood people. And once you do that, that action will change you so that you in turn can change the world. Thank you.